The sound of a gunshot still echoes in my head. My daughter was wearing white, standing under the oak tree where she used to play as a kid, and in one split second blood bloomed across her dress. The woman who pulled the trigger was our HOA president. She thought she was enforcing community standards. She had no idea she'd just declared war on the Chief Justice of the state. I never thought my own neighborhood would become a battlefield. I'm Robert Williams, 58 years old, Chief Justice husband and father. I've spent my entire life defending the law, making sure justice means something. But that morning, standing in the backyard of our Maple Grove home, I realized laws don't stop hate, not when it's hiding behind a clipboard and a fake smile. We moved into Maple Grove 15 years ago. It was quiet, safe, and full of professionals who waved from their driveways and pretended to care. My wife Sarah and I loved it. Our daughter Emma grew up there. She used to swing under that same oak tree barefoot and laughing. When she told me she wanted to get married right there in that yard, I couldn't have been prouder. Everything was perfect. The flowers, the chairs, the arch, Sarah decorated with white ribbons. Until Margaret Henderson showed up. HOA president, early 50s, sharp tongue. A woman who treated community rules like commandments from God. At first she was just annoying, sending emails about lawn heights and mailbox paint. But when she heard we were hosting a wedding at our home, she turned it into a crusade. She came to my door one evening, chin lifted like she was addressing a criminal. "Justice Williams," she said with that voice people use when they're pretending to be polite but really want to spit in your face. This kind of event doesn't fit the Maple Grove standards. We can't have music and crowds disturbing the peace. I kept calm. "Mrs. Henderson, we've filed every permit, paid every fee, followed every guideline. Everything's within the law." She smiled tightly. "The HOA doesn't care about city laws. We have our own standards here." And then she said it quiet, sharp. "People like you always think you can do whatever you want. People like me." I'd heard that phrase all my life in courtrooms, on campaign trails, behind polite smiles. But hearing it on my own front porch hit different. Still, I held my composure. I'd faced senators and crooked lawyers. I wasn't going to let one suburban tyrant ruin my daughter's wedding. But she didn't stop. Over the next few weeks, Margaret made it her mission to destroy our plans. She sent letters to every neighbor warning them about disruptive gatherings. She called the police twice when we tested the speakers. She even went to the city claiming we'd forged documents. Emma started losing sleep. One night she told me, "Dad, maybe we should just move it somewhere else. A hotel or something." I looked at her, my strong, fearless girl, and I said, "No. This is your home. No one takes this away from you." But deep down, I wasn't so sure anymore. For the first time in decades, I felt powerless. All my years defending justice, and I couldn't stop a bitter woman with a clipboard. I started to wonder if I'd made a mistake raising my family here, if maybe I'd gotten too comfortable believing the law could fix everything. Then came the wedding day. The sun was shining, guests were laughing, music was soft and sweet. Sarah looked radiant, and Emma, God, she was glowing. She walked down the aisle arm in arm with me, her veil shimmering in the light. I tried to ignore the black figure standing across the street. Margaret Henderson, dressed like she was at a funeral, arms crossed, eyes full of hate. When the ceremony began, she started yelling from the property line. "This is a violation of community standards. I'm calling the police." The minister hesitated, but Emma squeezed my hand. "Don't let her ruin this," she whispered. So we kept going. We kept pretending she wasn't there. 5 minutes later, she disappeared into her house. I thought maybe she'd finally given up. I was wrong. When she came back, she wasn't holding a clipboard, she was holding a rifle. Everything froze. The guests screamed. The music stopped. She waved the gun in the air and shouted, "This illegal gathering ends today." I stepped forward, my voice steady, even as my heart hammered in my chest. "Put the gun down, Margaret. You don't want to do this." But she was beyond reason. "You people don't belong here," she screamed. David, Emma's fiancé, moved to shield her. Sarah cried out. And then Margaret swung the rifle finger on the trigger, pointing straight at my daughter. "Stop it," Emma cried. "This is a wedding. We're not hurting anyone." "Shut up," Margaret shouted, and the gun went off. The sound tore through the air. Emma felt blood spreading across her grandmother's lace dress. For a second, everything went silent, and then the world exploded. Guests dove for cover. Someone tackled Margaret. I dropped to my knees beside my daughter. "Emma, stay with me," I begged, pressing my hand over the wound. "You're going to be okay." Her voice was small. "I'm sorry, Dad. I ruined everything." "Don't you dare apologize," I said, tears blurring my vision. "You did nothing wrong." The ambulance came fast, but time didn't move at all. I rode with her sirens screaming, Sarah clutching her hand the whole way. The doctors said the bullet shattered her collarbone, tore through nerves. They didn't know if she'd ever use her arm again. I sat there in the hospital that night, covered in dried blood, staring at my reflection in the vending machine glass. The Chief Justice of the state, powerless. I'd spent my life believing the law was sacred, that justice would always prevail. But where was justice now? My daughter's wedding dress was soaked in blood, and the woman who did it would probably get a lawyer who'd call it an accident. I almost gave up right then. I almost walked away from everything. But then I saw Emma asleep in that hospital bed, her hand twitching every time a monitor beeped. And something inside me shifted. I realized justice wasn't enough. I needed accountability. Real, unrelenting accountability. 2 weeks later, Margaret Henderson was arrested. Her lawyer argued it was an accident, a warning shot. I called the district attorney, Patricia Morris, an old law school friend. "Patricia, I said this wasn't a mistake. This was hate. I need your office to go all in." There was silence then. "You've got it, Robert. We'll make sure she faces everything she deserves." I called Judge Harrison Blake, who'd once owed his appointment to my recommendation. "You'll be presiding over the Henderson case," I told him. "Don't let her lawyer spin this into sympathy." "Robert, you know I can't. I'm not asking you to." I cut him off. "I'm asking you to remember what justice looks like." Detective Maria Santos was handling the investigation. "We found more, sir," she said. "Henderson's been harassing minority families in the neighborhood for years. Letters, vandalism, false police reports." I clenched my jaw. "Then make sure the jury sees every bit of it." For months I moved pieces behind the curtain. No bribes, no corruption, just influence. I called in every favor I'd ever earned. I wasn't going to let her hide behind bureaucracy. The trial came 4 months later. Emma testified first, her right arm in a sling. She told the jury how the woman screamed at her, aimed the rifle, and fired. David testified next, his voice cracked, describing how he watched the woman he loved fall in her wedding dress. Sarah couldn't even finish her statement. She broke down on the stand. The prosecution's evidence was airtight. Video footage showed Margaret crossing the property line, gun raised. Witnesses repeated her words. "These people don't belong here." Her own recorded police statement sealed her fate. The defense tried to paint her as a concerned neighbor under stress. But the jury wasn't fooled. They took less than 3 hours to come back. Guilty. On all counts, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, terroristic threats, hate crime enhancement. 15 years in prison, no parole for 8. When the verdict was read, Margaret collapsed, sobbing that her life was over. I didn't flinch. Justice had been served, but I wasn't finished. Emma's medical bills were staggering, the nightmares even worse. So we filed a civil lawsuit. Pain and suffering, emotional distress, lost wages, everything. The jury awarded her $2.3 million. Margaret lost her house, her savings, her job, her license. The HOA dissolved under the weight of lawsuits and shame. Every family she'd ever bullied came forward. Her name became a cautionary tale, racism with a price tag. Months later, I got a letter from prison. Shaky handwriting. "Justice Williams," it said. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I thought I was protecting my community, but I was just protecting my own hate. I've lost everything. I'm sorry." I read it 3 times, then locked it in my desk drawer. Her apology didn't heal the scars on my daughter's shoulder. It didn't erase the nightmares. But it meant one thing: she finally understood the cost of her hatred. I never told anyone what I felt that night after the verdict. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel triumph. I felt finality. Justice and revenge had merged into the same thing. Some would say I abused my power. Maybe I did. But when I watched Emma raise her left hand because the right one still hurt to brush a tear from her face, I knew I'd do it all again. I walked into my backyard a few months later, stood under that oak tree, and looked at the patch of grass where blood had once soaked the ground. The wind was quiet. The birds were back. For the first time in months, the neighborhood felt peaceful. Margaret Henderson thought she was powerful because she ran an HOA. She thought rules gave her control. She thought the law was on her side. She was wrong. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Power means nothing if you use it to hurt others, because sooner or later real justice always finds you.